All right. Welcome back, everybody. Get ready, because today we are diving into some pretty wild stuff. We've got this CNN article, and let me tell you, it's a doozy. It's basically laying out all of the executive orders Trump has ready to go for his first day back in office. I mean, over 100 of them. Can you believe that?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to process, right? I mean, it's like he's hitting the ground running, that's for sure.
It really is. I mean, it's not just the sheer number of them, though. It's like what they actually say about his priorities,
Mm.
immigration, energy, even like totally reshaping the federal government. It's all in there.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because you can kind of see how he's using these orders to really set the agenda right from the get-go. It's a pretty bold move, I
Yeah.
mean, he's essentially bypassing Congress, and that's bound to create some serious legal battles down the line, right?
Oh, absolutely. All right, well, let's break it down, starting with immigration. The article mentions that Trump's planning on declaring a national emergency at the border. Again, didn't we already see this, back in his first term?
Yeah, we did. And it's a strategy that lets him use money from the Defense Department without having to get approval from Congress.
Right.
So this time around, it could mean a huge increase in the military presence at the border, maybe even construction projects that are way bigger than what we've seen before.
So, like what? Like bigger walls, more surveillance, all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Think like massive walls, tons of surveillance tech, you name it.
Wow, so this isn't just symbolic, huh? He's really looking to completely change how the border looks and operates. And then on top of that, there's this plan to label certain drug cartels as terrorist organizations. I mean, that feels like a pretty major escalation, right?
Totally, yeah. I mean, it's not just about talking tough.
Yeah.
That designation could have serious consequences for our foreign policy and for how law enforcement operates. Like, just think about it. We could be looking at military strikes against these cartels, sanctions against people and businesses connected to them. It's a whole different game.
And that would have to impact our relationship with Mexico too, right? It seems like it could lead to a lot of unintended consequences.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, there are definitely concerns that this move could make the region even more unstable, could even lead to more violence. And then there's the legal question. Can the president even do that? Can he just decide which foreign groups are terrorists? This is going to be a huge debate in the courts.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so immigration is clearly a top priority for Trump, and he's not afraid to ruffle some feathers, that's for sure. But this article also talks about some pretty big changes to how the government itself works. And one that really stood out to me was this thing called Schedule F. What is that all about?
Well, Schedule S is basically a policy that's supposed to reduce job protections for federal employees. So, in a nutshell, it makes it easier to hire and fire people in a bunch of different government positions.
Okay, so less job security for government workers. What's
Mhm.
the thinking behind that?
Well, the argument is that it will make the government more efficient, more accountable. The idea is that right now it's just too difficult to get rid of employees who aren't doing a good job, right?
Okay.
But then, of course, the people who don't like this idea are saying that it could end up leading to a workforce with less experience and less motivation. It could even politicize a lot of these civil service jobs.
Right, because if people are worried about getting fired for political reasons, that's definitely going to affect their decision making. So it sounds like Schedule F is a pretty major shift in how the entire federal workforce operates.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And it comes along with this brand new department, the Department of Government Efficiency.
Catchy.
And get this, it's going to be led by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy.
No way.
Yep.
Wow.
And their goal, as you might guess, is to streamline everything, cut through red tape, basically make the government run more like a uh, well-oiled machine, I guess you could say.
Musk and Ramaswamy in charge of government efficiency. I mean, that's a very interesting pairing, to say the least. What does efficiency even really mean in this context?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Hmm.
We don't know all the details yet, but if you look at their track records, you can probably guess that they're going to be focusing on things like technology, making decisions based on data, maybe even some pretty radical restructuring of existing agencies.
Yeah, interesting. And I'm guessing that getting rid of all those diversity, equity, and inclusion policies is also part of this whole efficiency push, right?
Yeah, it's definitely related. The people who support this move say that these policies create a lot of unnecessary bureaucracy and that just focusing on merit is enough. But, people who oppose this are worried that it's going to lead to a less diverse workforce and that will lose some of the progress we've made towards making the federal government more inclusive.
Okay, so we've got this potential showdown brewing at the border, a big shakeup of how the federal government works, and a whole new department focused on streamlining the government. I mean, Trump is definitely coming in swinging. But there's one more big thing in this article that we need to talk about. Energy. What's the plan there?
Well, it seems like Trump really likes declaring national emergencies. The article says he's planning another one, this time about energy.
Another one. Wow.
Yep, and just like with the border, this lets him go around Congress and make big changes all on his own.
So, two national emergencies right off the bat. But what is this energy emergency supposed to be?
The details are still a bit fuzzy, but based on what he's done before and what he talked about during his campaign, it's probably safe to say he's going to use this to push for deregulation of the energy sector.
Okay.
So think about things like rolling back environmental protections, speeding up approvals for pipelines and drilling projects. Basically, it's like putting the pedal to the metal for domestic energy production.
So, good news for the fossil fuel industry, maybe not so good for the environment.
That's definitely a big concern for a lot of environmental groups. They're saying that deregulation like this could really set us back in terms of fighting climate change. It could lead to even more pollution. And it also makes you wonder whether this push for more energy production here in the U.S. is really about energy independence or whether it's more about helping out certain industries.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so let's recap. We've got a potential clash over immigration policy, a huge overhaul of the federal workforce, and a pretty controversial energy strategy all crammed into day one. It's pretty clear that Trump wants to make a big splash right out of the gate for his second term. But what does all this mean for the average person? How are these executive orders actually going to impact our lives?
I mean, that's the real question, right?
Hmm.
It's easy to get lost in all the political stuff, but we need to remember what the real world consequences of all this are going to be.
Yeah.
And those consequences could be huge, affecting everything from how much we pay for gas to how diverse our government workforce is to how secure our borders are.
Exactly. These aren't just abstract policy debates happening somewhere far away. They could affect every part of our lives. And
Yeah,
that's what makes this deep dive so important. We need to understand what's at stake here and how these executive orders could change the future of our country.
absolutely. It's like we're seeing the blueprint for Trump's second term. It's like bolder, more in your face, and he almost seems less worried about how things are usually done in politics.
Yeah, that's a great point. It does feel like he's learned a few things from his first time around, and now he's back with an even clearer idea of what he wants to do, and maybe even a better plan for how to actually do it.
Right, exactly. And one of the tools he's really seems to like using are these executive orders. I mean, they've always been part of what presidents can do, but the sheer number of them this time and how far they reach, it's really something we haven't seen before. And it really makes you think about the balance of power between the president and Congress.
It's funny because a lot of people, myself included, probably don't spend that much time thinking about executive orders. But when you put it like that, it really highlights how much influence the president has, even if Congress isn't totally on board.
That's right. And even though executive orders can be challenged in court, they can have a really big and immediate impact on actual policies, especially when they're used as strategically as we're seeing here.
So are we basically saying that Trump is planning on running the country by executive order?
I wouldn't go that far, but it's definitely a big part of his plan. It seems like he's using these orders to kind of set the agenda, to show everyone exactly what direction he wants his administration to go in, and maybe even to force Congress to act on some issues.
It's almost like he's saying, this is what I'm going to do, so try and stop me.
Right.
And considering how divided Congress is right now, it'll be interesting to see what they do about this kind of aggressive approach.
Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be pushback, legal challenges, a whole lot of political fighting back and forth. But in the meantime, these orders will be shaping what policies get put in place. They're setting the tone for the next 4 years.
And we can't forget about how all this looks to everyone, right?
Uh-huh.
These orders send a really clear message to his supporters, to his opponents, to the whole world about what a second Trump administration is all about.
Yeah, it's definitely a bold statement. And whether you like his policies or not, you got to admit he's got a clear vision and he's willing to use every tool he has to make it happen.
So taking all of this into account, what do you think about the bigger picture? Where do you see this all heading?
That's a tough one. I think we're heading into a time of some serious political turbulence. These executive orders are probably going to make the divisions that already exist even worse. It could lead to even more gridlock in Congress and maybe even more fighting between the two parties.
So maybe more of the same political battles we've been seeing in recent years.
It's possible, but with even more at stake this time. These orders deal with some of the most controversial things in America right now: immigration, energy, the role of the government, and they're going to start some really heated debates everywhere.
And it sounds like the courts are going to be pretty busy, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. A lot of these orders are going to face legal challenges, and the Supreme Court might end up having to make the final call on a lot of them.
It feels like we're at a real turning point. Like the decisions made in the next few months are going to have a lasting impact on what direction the country goes in.
I think that's right. The stakes are really high, and we don't know for sure what's going to happen. But one thing's for sure, it's going to be a really interesting and important time in American history.
I have to say, this deep dive has been really eye-opening. It's definitely given us a lot to think about, and it seems like the CNN article has only just scratched the surface of what's coming. What advice would you give to our listeners who are trying to make sense of all of this?
I think the most important thing is to stay informed, to look at all the different viewpoints, and don't be afraid to ask tough questions. These are complicated issues, and there are no easy answers. But if we stay involved and informed, we can all play a part in shaping the future of the country.
That's great advice. And I think it's important to remember that even though things might feel really chaotic right now, our democracy is strong. We've been through tough times before, and we've always come out stronger on the other side.
I completely agree. The American spirit of resilience and finding new ways to do things has always been what makes us strong. And as long as we keep talking to each other, keep respecting each other's views, and keep working together toward shared goals, I believe we can get through these challenges and come out as a stronger, more united nation.
It's crazy to think, right? We're not just talking about some policy tweaks here and there. This is like potentially changing how our entire government works.
Yeah, you're right. It's not just about what these specific executive orders say. It's about how they're being used and what that tells us about how the presidency is changing.
It feels like we're in uncharted territory here. Like the lines between the different parts of the government are getting blurry.
Yeah, and that's something we've been seeing for a while now, right?
Hmm.
A president who's taking more and more power, a Congress that's divided and maybe not as effective as it used to be, and the courts. They're constantly being asked to decide on super political issues.
And all this is happening while we've got these huge divisions in society, an uncertain economy, and things feeling unstable all over the world. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It really is. And I think it just shows how important it is for all of us to be involved now more than ever. We can't just sit back and watch. We need to be informed citizens, keep up with what's going on, and hold our leaders accountable. We need to participate and make our voices heard.
So where does that leave us, the regular people, in all of this? What can we actually do to make a difference and help shape the future of our country?
Well, that's the question we all need to be asking. I think it all starts with educating ourselves, understanding the issues, really listening to different viewpoints,
Mm.
and thinking critically about all the information that is thrown at us every single day.
It's so easy to get stuck in those echo chambers on social media and cable news, right? Where everyone's just shouting their own opinions and nobody's really listening to each other.
Exactly. We got to break out of those echo chambers and have real conversations with people who see things differently. That's how we start to understand each other and actually make progress.
And it's not just about talking, it's about doing something. Contacting our representatives, supporting groups that align with what we believe in, getting involved in our own communities.
Absolutely. Every little thing we do adds up. It's about taking back our power and remembering that each one of us has a role to play in building the future we want.
I like that, taking back our power.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel powerless when all this is happening, but you're right. We do have power, both as individuals and as a collective.
And that power comes from being engaged, from being willing to speak out, challenge the way things are, and demand better from our leaders.
Well said. This deep dive has been so insightful and, to be honest, a little bit scary. But it's also motivating to be reminded that we're not just along for the ride. We actually have the power to influence where this all goes.
That's the right attitude. And that's what I hope everyone listening takes away from this conversation. A feeling of empowerment, a commitment to being involved, and the understanding that our democracy depends on every single one of us.
Thanks for joining us today as we dove into what Trump's first-day executive orders could mean. We've covered a lot, and I know it can feel overwhelming. But remember, knowledge is power. By staying informed and engaged, we can all help create a fairer and more just future for everyone.
It was great being here. And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us. Keep digging into these topics, keep having those important conversations, and never forget how powerful your voice can be.